Hi everyone, I would like to welcome you to the January update for the milk markets of Order 33. This is Dr. Lawrence Jones with Farm Institute, and this program was developed specifically for Novus Agriscience. Now, it's amazing what 1 or 2 days in the market can do, so I downloaded this data all Thursday night, and then we'll see what happened on Friday, and especially in the soybean market that was up 40 cents, so things can change in a bit of a hurry. So if some of the numbers don't actually match the week end, that's because it was downloaded on Thursday night and prepared on Thursday night. But overall, the fundamentals all remain exactly the same. Now, the reason that I do this program the first week of the month is we have just finally settled the November production, cheese production, everything about November, so we have a good idea of what's happening there. Even though we do have the December classic components already, so this is the time of the month that we're closing off 1 month and starting to collect data on the next month. So it's always an interesting time as to when is the beginning and the end of the industry. So the idea is to put this together after we have the dairy products report, but hopefully before we get this Statistical uniform prices. Now, one of the things that I want to kind of comment here is we spend an awful lot of time talking about supply. The industry loves to talk about cow numbers, production, but we don't really spend very much time at all talking about demand. And I think that's got to change because demand is the thing that is driving everything here. And I also want to make a comment about trend versus forecast. And again, I'm not throwing dispersion at anyone, but forecasts are, to me, kind of suspect. I'm going to give you a couple examples. The example would be that you go into the doctors and they say, man, we forecasted you to be at 220 pounds. We expected you to gain 20 pounds. And you only gained 15, so good job. You came in under forecast. Whereas you go to the other doctor and say, your trend has been 200 pounds. You gained 15, so you were 15 pounds above trend, and that's really bad. And so the problem with a forecast is it can actually build in some bad information. So I am very much a trend analysis, and I look at the 5-year trends to see what I expect to be happening. So there's a lot of data on this slide. If you want to look at specific data, stop the video and take a look at it. But what I did is try to just summarize it into some overall bullet points. And the bottom line is I declared November for cheese to be a neutral month. So cow numbers were slightly below trend, not significantly. Milk per cow was at trend. Milk supply was basically at trend. Cold storage decreased seasonally. We expected it to decrease. Production was down a little bit, about 2% before trend line. Disappearance was about at trend line, and there was a slightly decrease in surplus because of that production. At the end of the day, the trend should have been for about 37.2 days of excess cheese. That would be the stocks to use ratio. And we came in at 37.16, so very, very close. So we would call this neutral. And if we go now and look at the November cheese price, it would suggest that. October was, $1.77, November $1.76. That's, kind of a neutral scenario. And December now is, $1.75, so it's about in the same thing. And the real question that you ought to be asking is, what use is any of this? And to me, what's interesting is the long-term deviations from trend. And so we're about, at trend. So I would expected December to come in, right at trend. So $1.75. Now, January might be a little bit of a different issue, and February a little bit of a different issue, and we'll get to that. But at least through November, we're basically at, the trend line that we've been at for the last 5 years. Again, that does not necessarily suggest that that trend is a good trend. It's just a continuation of that trend. And so a couple points that I continue to make to people. If we look at cow numbers came down, but we are still way too many cows. This was good milk prices. We're way above that. These were bad milk prices. We're, at least better than that. And anybody that talks about this has been a great contraction ignores the fact that we never should have been, above 9.42 at the best. All of this was just a market out of control. And the thing that has really probably made me as bearish on the future as anything is these stocks of American cheese. These are just at all-time highs. So when I look at the cheese stocks, I look at total of all the cheese. So this is just the American cheese, which is going to impact, the National Dairy Sales Report as much as anything. These are just at an all-time high, and we've got to somehow get these cheese stocks down a little bit. So if we look at order 33, one of the things I'd like to kind of comment on is if we take 2021 and kind of split it here, this has actually been an uptrending year. I'm not necessarily saying prices were good, but at least it was trending up in the right direction. And again, this was pandemic, so we kind of ignore that. And again, 2019 was the same scenario. We were trending up. The difference between 2019 and 2021 is in 2019 we were low on cow numbers, where in 2021 we've got an excess in cow numbers. If we look at the class 3 utilization, that's going to impact your statistical uniform price. Right now, order 33 is not depooling. So again, we can ignore this for a while. These are periods when they were depooling. So if you look at now, we're 41% class 3. We've been as low as 5.9 if we've been depooling, and we'll get more to that if we see depooling coming along. But at this point, I don't see any depooling of class 3 and order 33 coming along anytime soon. And part of that is the difference between class 3 and class 4. If you look at those two, generally we need a 75-cent advantage of class 3 to depool. And right now, class 4 is beating class 3 by 50 cents, clear up to $1.50. So class 4 is the winner at this point. Now, one of the things that we've got to kind of touch on is percent fat. Holy mackerel, guys, look at this percent fat that you just had, for the last statistical price. That is the highest percent fat in a long time. Again, it's very seasonal. We expect this, but you've set some all-time highs for fat production. And again, so one of the things that's going to happen in the future is we're going to talk about pounds of milk, and that's not going to be representative of what's going on. We're going to have to start talking about the percent component. And the same was true for protein. Just phenomenally high numbers, a little over 3.3. Again, very seasonal. We expect this. But right now, we are just making a tremendous amount of fat and protein on a percentage basis. So I'm going to take a guess at the statistical uniform price for December. That should be out here in another week. Again, class 3 is 1836. That's been set. I'm suspecting that your PPD will be around $1.30 in Cleveland. And that's going to give us a 1966 statistical uniform price. Again, butterfat and protein and other solids have all been set at this point. But you compare that to November, that's almost $1 higher than that statistical uniform price. And if we go and look at how this compares, this is very much an upward trend. And my question that I've been talking to dairymen about the other day is, what is going to happen to supply of milk when dairymen start getting a sniff of slightly higher prices? Do we think cow number is going to come down, and do we think production is going to come down with these higher prices? So we need to stop for just a minute and talk about the last rally, because things have been rallying in the industry for the last about 4 days. That's why this last week has been very interesting. And I want to talk about what this rally means. And again, it's been up significantly. So there's a couple different aspects of this. Number one is this blue graph is the value of the spot market. The line below it is basically cheese times 10, because as an old timer, if you wanted to know the class 3 value, you would take cheese times 10. And again, and historically, that's not been very different. 30, 40 cents at the most. Look at this difference. This right now is $1.85, and this is all being caused by high butter and whey prices. Now, the important part of this rally to me is long term, what happens if butter begins to reconcile back to where it's been historically? What happens if we get a problem with whey? A lot of that's going to China for the pig population. That's going to take probably $1.40 off of our class 3 prices if any of these have any kind of problems. And so again, if we look at this run up in the actual blocks and barrels, where blocks are the blue, the barrels are the red, again, a big run up. Now let's go back and remind ourselves here back in the end of September, early October, we had a huge run up in barrels. That was all supply chain. They were having problems getting people to work in these factories, and they were having problems with some of the raw material that goes into packaging barrels. And that all came back to back to the numbers that we've been seeing historically. The rumor in the industry right now is this was also supply chain. And so again, is that going to drop back? And if we look at where blocks have been historically, about $1.85. There was a nice resistance here. They went up, they hit resistance back here. Is this going to come back to $1.85 on the spot market in the next few days? I wouldn't be surprised. Now, maybe a little higher than that, but with demand being kind of slowed down with Omicron and a few other things, I don't see this as being as bullish as what the market sees it at the moment. So here are your projected statistical uniform prices for the next year. Again, we probably should stop here at the end of 22, and I'll show you that why in a few minutes. But we're going to have the high prices in January, February, and then it's going to be pretty much a downward trend. Now, these are still good prices. These are much better than we'd had before, but the highest prices are probably going to be right here in the next couple months. And that makes sense if we look at the class 3 futures. Again, let's break 2022 right here. We're going to have some very high class 3 for January and February, and then this is going to trail off. And again, if we look at class 4, break this here, kind of the same thing. So everything is trailing off throughout 22. So the highest prices you're going to see are probably going to be in that January, February timeframe. Now, there's another aspect of this that you need to keep in mind is some people will call this bearish for the industry. I don't particularly like that term because we look at prices on a particular month. For example, if this whole curve is coming down, then I call that bearish, or if it's going up, I call it bullish. But yeah, it is trending down, but right now I suspect the industry is going to be a little bit bearish, so I'm expecting these to drop a little bit, but the entire complex will drop. So if we look at fat prices, 229 is what just came in at, looking like that's going to jump up. Fat's going to be a pretty good on-farm price, 280-ish, plus or minus a few for the next few months. And that's driven largely by the butter price. Protein prices is a little bit wild here, and it all depends what's going to happen with the cheese. And it looks like January is going to be about the same, but February is going to jump up above 3 and then trail back off a little bit. And a lot of that is going to be on the cheese prices. Other solids has just been our hero for a long time. We were clear down at 12 cents at one point. We peaked up to 46. We've kind of came down a little bit. Exports have started taking off, and then this is taking off nicely. And so we're going to be about 50 cents in other solids. And consider that again, a typical number, historically was about 12 cents. And so adding another 40 some cents to that price is adding a significant amount of dollars to the class 3. So as I finish up here, I wanted to give you kind of a glimpse into the polar vortex. I know a lot of you are getting some really cold weather right now. And so this is a map of the winds over the United States, over the North Pole. And again, what we're seeing is some significant intrusion of cold air. Usually this thing is just nice and tight and not intruding into North America at all. And so again, you can see all this cold air coming in and really cooling off these areas. So I know there was a lot buried into this podcast, and I apologize. If you have any questions, please give me a holler, and I will do whatever I can to improve it next month if you give me some ideas of what you might want. So again, I want to thank Novus AgriScience for funding this, and I hope everybody has a great month.